Hello and welcome to today's Farm Country Update. I'm Clint Griffiths, the editor of Farm Journal Magazine, the host of AgDay Television. Sure appreciate you spending a little bit of time with us today. We've got a great panel discussion slated where we'll be talking about some of the factors that will drive farm spending in 2022. Real quick, why don't we introduce a few of our panelists that'll be joining us. We have Ashley Arrington. She's with the ARM folks, and Ashley works for the Ag Resource Management Company. Matt Martin, he's a farmer from Kingman, Indiana. Greg Peterson, you know him as Machinery Pete, and Jim Rothermich with Iowa Appraisal. Thank you all for being here. And Matt, why don't we start with you? Well, before we do that, why don't we real quick, if you have a question during today's webinar, please feel free to click on the Q&A button and you can ask your questions there. We'll try to do that rather than go through the chat. That way we'll be able to see those and approve them and click through them that way. But why don't we begin with Matt Martin, farmer from Indiana. And Matt, I know you farm there in West Central Indiana near Illinois, and it's been kind of a busy week this week as you get ready to kind of kick off spring planting. Tell us how things are going.
Yeah, so we're like everybody else. We're freezing to death, honestly. But it's pretty cold, and we've kind of we've been dry enough that we've been able to start some planters, and we typically tend to push the envelope as far as starting early, or try to. And so we've got a little bit in. There's not been a lot of activity in our area. We had some showers go through this morning. It's supposed to have really cold temperatures and then get warm over the weekend. So we're optimistically looking forward to the weekend to warming up, getting some soil temperatures up. And so we've been sticking some corn and beans both in the ground. I hope it's the right thing to do. So
yeah. Matt, as we talk about 2022, we look at where prices are. Obviously, it's an incredible opportunity. There are plenty of factors at play. Talk to me about your thought process for 2022 and kind of getting into the planting season and the growing season and the decisions that are having to be made here.
Yeah, so I think that, I think for myself personally, I'm as optimistic as I've been since I started farming when I got out of college. And so I think with the incredible futures prices that we're looking at, I think we're going to see strong basis moves for the fall of 22. Which is kind of why we're gearing up planning early, is to try to take advantage of some of those early basis levels. We were fortunate enough to lock a lot of our inputs in, which I've discussed previously, and so heading into 22, I'm very optimistic. Am I cautious about 23 and 24? Sure. I do think we'll still see strong commodity prices, but our inputs, if we can get them, or the availability of them, I think is going to be in question. But for 22, I'm pretty optimistic. I think we're going to, from the looks of the weather here, I think we're going to be we're going to struggle to get things planted in a real timely fashion across the country as a whole. So, which in turn I think makes us more bullish. But we're I think we're pretty fortunate to be farming where we're at and be in this country right now. So
yeah, well, and Matt mentioned that we had talked before. Matt is featured in our latest issue of Farm Journal Magazine, where we talk about some of the strategies to help balance out some of these input costs, and one of those things being adding storage to the farm. And when we talk about, Matt, things that you can do or you may invest in for your operation, go through a few of the things that you've done to really kind of help balance out some of the supply chain hangups that you've seen, both from the input side and from your machinery side. I mean, you're doing a lot on your farm that you're investing in now for the future.
Yeah, so we've taken some steps, and part of it I think was a good management call. Part of it has been luck, if you will, and so we've been fortunate there. But we put in a liquid system where we switched from a lot of fall anhydrous to, we're going to side dress 28. Part of that was switching from 20-inch rows back to 30s. So we put in a liquid system last year, and so we're getting ready to use that for the first time. So we can store about 2/3 of our total nitrogen use here on farm in 28%. And then as we speak right now, they're pouring walls on a dry facility. So we'll be able to hold about 2,000 ton of dry fertilizer, putting a blender and scales and load out facility in. So we'll be able to handle the bulk of our dry. And then we bumped up our on-farm fuel storage. We put in Now we can hold 90,000 gallon of propane fuel too, which helps in the fall, just with the logistics of getting gas in time for dryers and stuff. So it's been a time, I think, when we started thinking that way and started moving that way with some changes in the farm, and so it's been, the timing of it's been good. I know that since we bought stainless 30,000 gallon stainless tanks is what we bought for a 28, and just the price of those, availability of those since a year ago has really skyrocketed, but they've sure paid their way quickly. We tried to put the dry facility in last summer, and we just couldn't get it done in time from a logistics standpoint. So we'll have that done. So we're trying to become very self-sufficient, if you will. I'm very excited to have the product in hand ahead of time, so I don't have to worry about taking delivery. And obviously there's a time when, depending on the supply and demand cycle, where we can lock those prices in and take delivery of the product, and be more aggressive at trying to seek some discounts on some of those inputs.
Matt, is that a different line of thinking than maybe you had at the start of your career or even 5 years ago?
Absolutely. At the start of my career, it seems like availability was never an issue. Price, it was more competitive to take delivery. We used to take delivery of anhydrous and things like that. So we have done that in the past, but not to this scale, to where it's like, okay, we want to be able to try to have on hand most of the product that we need to put a crop in. And so now it's more of a thinking for me personally, that I would love to be able to have everything sitting here on the farm that we need to put a crop in for 23, which is kind of what we're gearing up to do. We have for 22, we're not quite there yet, but in 23, I hope to be able to have a whole year's worth of supply of everything that's, seed, fertilizer, fuel, all that on hand. So that's our goal. And so I think there's going to be a lot of advantages to that. Just from being able to utilize our trucks and our labor force and in a year-round situation. So I think it's going to be good for us, I hope.
Now, I'll ask you this last question, Matt. And folks, if you have a question for Matt, please just jump in here. But from a finance standpoint, has that changed the business strategy at all, or the way you're having to think about maybe paying for some of those things, or looking at budgeting and things like that?
Yeah, I think that, with the rise in interest rates that we're looking at, and things of that nature, and kind of what our cost of money is going to be, and the way that we're set up, it's going to change us a little bit. But those savings, the savings that we're seeing on buying the product and already having it here are definitely worth doing. So so far it looks like a good thing to be doing.
Yeah, it's a great transition. Appreciate the segue. I'm going to bring in Ashley Arrington with AgResource Management. Ashley, as we talk about the cost of lending or cost of money, that seems to be one of those things that's top of everyone's mind as they go out there and start thinking about investments or even operating loans this year in 2022.
Absolutely. So first of all, can you hear me well?
Yes, we got you.
Good. Okay, making sure. Was having a little bit of an internet issue a second ago, but yeah, interest rates are definitely at the top of everyone's minds right now. I was actually looking at a prior presentation about months ago, and I was showing what the 30-year fixed rate was, and it's dead up 200 basis points higher today than it is. I mean, and when you're talking about the amount of money that's being put out there for real estate loans, with the price per acre, I'm sure we're going to get into land prices in a little bit here, and the trend in those is taking more money, and you're having to borrow more to purchase the same amount of acres that we were several years ago. So 200 basis points is a good bit of money that's being dropped onto everyone's expenses. So that's very much top of mind for everyone. But I mean, we're seeing interest rates not just on real estate, also on equipment, also on lines of credit go up, to 100 to 200 basis points, depending on the time period that the product's fixed.
Ashley, talk to me a little bit about the balance sheet this year, because we look at corn, there's an 8 in front of it. We look at soybeans, it's $17, and we can go on through and list all of cotton, all of the commodities, and the increase in gross that we're going to see this year. How is that going to shake out as we go through the year? What are some of the concerns or some of the thought process that some farms are going to have to think through and deal with this year?
Well, in terms of, the first part of the question as it relates to the balance sheet, we're seeing extreme strengthening in balance sheets. When I first came to ARM, it was 2020, and that was towards the end of 2020 when we first started to see the commodity prices move upward. And ever since then, we've seen the strengthening in the balance sheet. So that's, working capital is being built up by the additional commodity prices, and also the bottom part of the balance sheets being built up by increased land prices. So we're seeing strengthening of balance sheets, and then also equipment values. So all of the assets on the balance sheet are going up. So we're seeing strength there. And with that, we're seeing people get qualified for things. It was hard for me as, a real estate lender to get people qualified, 2020 and prior, because of, down years that we had in the commodity markets. Now we're seeing more people be able to qualify. But then, on the other side of that, like we just talked about, is the interest rates. More people are qualifying, but the interest rates are a little bit higher. So really taking a look, I think one thing to be mindful of, to go into the next part of your question, is to think about, what's worth taking a look at now in terms of purchasing real estate. What are the land prices associated with that, versus what they were before, the interest rate costs. If you want to preserve the working capital that you've built up at the top part of your balance sheet and not throw a bunch of cash into a new land purchase transaction, is it worth it to dip into the equity that you've already built up on your balance sheet? And if you do that and you have to be a part of a refinance for that and let go of a lower interest rate to get this higher one, is it worth it? So to weigh out the decisions on making trade-offs for a higher interest rate to pick up more land, is it worth it? Taking a look at the higher prices of land, is it worth it? Will it cash flow? And the sustainability of those increases. Because we're seeing a strengthening in balance sheets, a lot of it due to the appreciation of land prices, but is that appreciation going to be stable? How long is it going to be stable? Because you don't want to, take advantage of that only for it to fall off. And I know we'll get into land prices as part of this conversation as well. So that's something really to be mindful of. I think it's just your finance decisions and everything around it.
Ashley, do we know as working capital strengthens, what kind of or investment do farmers tend to make? Do they tend to lean into that working capital and work to improve their farms here, or do they work to preserve that? What trends do we see in this situation usually?
The number one question I always get all the time is, no matter where I'm at, where I'm speaking, what I'm doing, is how much working capital is too much? And that's a relative question. Is there ever too much? And it really depends on your operation. But when it comes to working capital, that's your first defense against price volatility, commodity price volatility, as well as input price volatility. So once things start to go south, if corn prices drop off, you have the cash there that you need to fill in any hole. And when input prices start to skyrocket, you have the additional money there to make those purchases if you've maxed out your line of credit. So I think it's extremely important to rebuild working capital. Maybe take a look back at previous balance sheets to see how far you've come, where you're comfortable at. And once you, and that's different per operation, but once you get to a level of comfort, then start thinking about, okay, where do I invest this? Because there does get a point where you have so much cash on hand, it could be working for you, because that's the whole point of running a business, is how can your assets best work for you? And sometimes there's a better way to put your assets to work than just have it sitting in a checking account somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we've had this we've talked in and around land prices and land values. I want to bring in Jim Rothermich here with Iowa Appraisal and the Land Talker. Jim, as we look at what's going on with land prices and whether or not that's going to be part of, some of the spending that we see this year, talk to us about some of the trends. Where are we in the whole land value situation? And what does this mean?
Well, using my auction data, the percentage increase from January 1, 2021 to December 31st, 2021, the increase was 36.5%, which is a very aggressive increase. And my auction data suggests, a lot of that happened the first 6 months of the year because of the shortage of land for sale. And as those prices got higher, it started jarring farms loose to sell. And we also had a fear of increased estate taxes. So we seen almost a 70% increase in farms for sale the last 6 months of the year. And in the last 3 months of the year, the prices started going up again. So doing my auction research, the next 30 days, there's not much land going to auction, but that's, cyclical because planting season's here. But I am worried about the supply of land for sale. And I see if we don't get more farms on the market, normal's not enough land for sale right now. The demand is that strong. We have so much pent up demand to buy land that we need to be running 25 to 50% over normal of the land for sale. And if we don't, we're going to see prices go higher, in my opinion.
Yeah. And Jim, we talk a little bit about, some of the factors influencing that demand. Even the situation in Ukraine seems to be buoying some of the strength that we've seen in these markets, and especially some of these land markets.
Absolutely. That, Ukraine is, I'm afraid the crop they plant is going to be for their use only. They're not going to export anything. So it's up to us to provide the rest of the world with commodities. And so it's, I don't know if we've seen the top on commodity prices yet. And as that goes higher, the demand to buy land goes higher. And as long as you see empty shelves in a grocery store, where it's prices are going to go higher for land because of that and inflation.
Matt, talk to me about inflation this year. Does it scare you at all as you put a crop in the ground and you're trying to corral your expenses and your costs?
Absolutely. I think it would scare anyone. I think for us for 22, we're locked in on all of our inputs and like fuel and stuff through the beginning of 23. But looking ahead to 23 and 24, it's going to take a substantial rise in commodity prices and maintain that price level to make cash flows work. And so, like I say, we're very optimistic about 22 just because we've kind of been fortunate in our decision making. But some of those decisions, like out into 23 and 24, I think that we're going to have to be really strong marketers at some point here and on when to really pull the trigger on a bulk of our crop for the next several years and take advantage of those opportunities. And of course, like I say, we're setting up where we can hopefully buy our inputs. But boy, the land issue, like he was talking, it scares us between rents and land values and things of that nature. Everybody's going to want a piece of this pie, and so it's easy when things are going up and things are strong to maintain those levels, but all of a sudden we see a drop in commodity prices. And as we all well know, whether it's the price at the pump or the grocery store or cash rent, whatever that is, those prices tend to lag in declining with everything else. So yeah, I think it wouldn't be smart to not be scared of this inflation at this time.
Now, Greg, we're gonna talk machinery and machinery prices here, but I want to ask Ashley real quick. Is there anything that we can think about or a way that we can look at this balance sheet as a way to protect or hedge against some of this inflation pressure, or is it you just have to know it's there and be ready for it?
What I like, and this may seem like a silly thing to say, but inflation's not going to wait for you to take notice of it. So it's not one of those, I hear this is going up and I'm going to wait to do this and maybe the price will dip back down. I heard a lot of that when this first started happening with input price starting to increase. Well, it's going to dip back down. It's not going to stay up this high. Kind of like how you view the commodity market almost is, you're waiting, instead of waiting on a higher price, you're kind of waiting on a dip there. And if you do that, you're going to lose in this market because it's continually going up. I would say building working capital is a good hedge against that, because if you're having to pay a higher price and you're having to borrow the money to purchase that against the operating line, that's, spending even more money towards that. So I think building working capital is the best natural hedge against that. It's your first defense against that volatility.
Greg, let's talk about some machinery because, I think it was the November issue of Farm Journal, we had you in talking about that this was one of the most historic markets that you've ever witnessed in the machinery industry. Where are we today? What are the trends that we're watching now, now that it's been, 4 or 5 months? Seems like a lifetime ago.
Yeah, I mean, back in November, Clinton, that was, I can't remember exactly what I wrote, but it was the highest market I'd ever seen at that point. I was a kid. I was 7 years old in 1973, so I don't remember too much specifics about that. I heard my dad and others, farmers and dealers, talking about that. But where we're at right now, we're just going vertical, just straight up. To the point where it's actually become very challenging to report on the space, because it's rising at a rate that I don't have anything to compare it to. And I think, something that Ashley said, yeah, this market isn't waiting for anything. And it's about availability. There's a lot of underlying forces at play that go way beyond just straight inflation. But we're sitting here talking, what is today, Wednesday? So, on Monday, I wrote 2 blogs. There were 6 new record prices. Yesterday in our own machinery Pete auction, we had another 5 or 6. It's just, good condition used farm equipment it's just rising at a rate that I've never seen before.
Is it a lack of supplies? Is it too much demand? Is it both?
It's both in spades. And if we tackle the supply side, maybe listeners have seen the stat that I tossed out, but there's a lot of data kind of behind the scenes at our machinerypete.com website that I don't lead with all the time, but we track things like volume of listings that dealers have for sale across all equipment categories. We track price movements on the retail side, and of course the auction price data. But if you look at let's talk high horse tractors. So if you look at the number of 5-year-old used tractors on the market now versus 3 years ago, it's down 79%, which that gets into the point like Ashley made. This market is moving, and the dangerous thing is to rely on what you knew in the past. Because when it comes to used machinery, as whether you're a farmer, dealer, lender, whatever, there's always been this big excess of late model used equipment, combines, high horse tractors, large planters, sprayers. That ain't there now. It's just not. So the supply is pinched. And then the demand part, I just wrote our Machinery Pete quarterly index report for the Wall Street folks, and I had to devote a section of it to a new trend we're identifying of farmers buying equipment as a hedge. And I'm talking nice used equipment, all types, planters rolling into the planting season, looking ahead for combines. I think farmers came out of last fall with a shock of parts availability and used inventory availability that has just forced an aggressiveness. And so we're seeing, and with the auction prices, Clinton, it's interesting. There's always the data point, what did it sell for? But then there's the piece, okay, why did you buy it? And that anecdotal piece has been fascinating. So again, we're seeing farmers scooping up an extra tractor, an extra planter, just so they make sure they have no downtime come spring or fall.
Matt, I saw you nodding your head there. What's the situation for you?
Exactly same thing. I expressed before we started how, we were down 6 weeks last fall with a brand new tractor waiting on parts. And so we've got a couple of tractors here in inventory, a sprayer that I don't even know if we'll use the tractors. I hope we don't, but it's kind of a sitting parts counter, if you will, that's tongue in cheek, but we do need the extra horsepower. And so just getting parts, it's just a hedge against being broke down and being delayed planning. And so heading into this spring where it looks like it's going to be later, I think that's going to be a big concern for a lot of people, is just having the equipment to be able to get the job done in a timely fashion.
Greg, that's interesting because I've always looked at your work as, hey, these are whole tractors, right? This is whole equipment, but how is the bleed over on inventory and parts demand? Talk a little bit more about how that all plays together. Are parts that short?
Well, last fall was scary for people, and that word scary, it's a 5-letter word, which I do Wordle every day and I'm not very good at it. So the 5-letter words, but I've never used the word scary in 32 and a half years writing about the farm equipment market, but now I have to. And it's scary in different directions. Now, if the tough thing to do when you're in a situation is to pull back and get the wider view on it. So if we do that in the equipment space, one of the big things that's happened over the last 5+ years is sort of the breathtaking consolidation on the dealer side. So now these dealer groups, no matter where you are in the country, you maybe used to have a 4-store, 5-store local dealership. And, they used to be the ones buying the 1 and 2 stores, but now it's the 25+ stores buying up the 8 to 10 dealerships. And when you get to that scale, the way they were dealing with their excess used inventory was much different than the small stores because they're so much more capitalized and they just take a programmatic approach to it. So even before commodity prices started taking off fall of 20 through 21, these large dealers were grinding down their excess used. And so again, now that used is just not there, and the parts availability, I mean, last fall, if you were on our social media sites, a number of times guys saying, how many hours they had to drive to find that one specific part. It's just like we haven't seen before. So those all get factored in. And then if you talk about new equipment, okay, so, hey, cool, I decided to buy a new planter. Now, and then the question was going to be, are you going to have it in time? Or same with a combine or a piece of harvest equipment in the fall, which it backs things up. And then so you've got that new one on the way, but maybe you want to sell your planter then, but wait a minute, I can't sell my planter now because what if my new one doesn't show up? So the whole thing is just problematic. And I think it's made everyone in the space just have to be more aggressive to make sure you can do what you got to do.
We did get a question come in from Lynn Henderson. Lynn, thank you so much for asking this question. It's for Jim. Other than the seller and the real estate agent, who benefits from these record high land prices? Give us a little perspective around that.
Well, anybody that owns land benefits because it makes what they have worth more. So that's who benefits the most, in my opinion. And as far as young farmers, yeah, it's a barrier with those higher prices, but if they own land, it makes that worth more too. So it's a kind of a catching a falling knife for them. But the adjoining landowners, people who own land that benefit the most from the higher prices, in my opinion.
We were talking before we started, Jim, that over the past year, the percent gain here has been pretty staggering.
Right. Right.
Do you see any way that falls back down, or is this are we at a new plateau?
Well, this market is making me nervous that we're not getting we had such a push last fall. I'm not, we're kind of in the normal range right now. Normal's not enough. So the market's suffocating for land to sell, and buyers are going to, because of that, buyers are going to willing to push those prices higher. And so we could see some spikes up, maybe, $27,000 an acre on a piece of ground somewhere like Northwest Iowa. That's where we get those huge numbers most of the time. So the supply shortage is an issue right now. Hopefully these higher prices, and we get into the summertime, there's going to be more farms for sale, but right now there's not enough inventory.
Do higher interest rates, do you think that slows down demand here? And I might follow that up with Greg, that same question. Right now
interest rates are historically low. Right now, I don't think it's affecting it at all. And interest rates is not everything on land prices. It's just part of it. And right now, I don't think it's high enough to affect it. I don't think in 2022, it's going to get high enough to affect those land prices. 2023, we'll have to see. But if we're running $8-10 bushels for corn, it could go pretty much higher and it might not have any effect, but we'll find out. But right now it's no effect.
Ashley, I
In
saw
my
you
opinion.
shaking your head.
No, it's a year and a half ago, all I was doing was refis, consolidation, stretching out AMs, things like that. I've not had a deal come across my desk in the last 6 months that didn't. If it was a refi, it was a refi with a purchase component or just a straight purchase. People will mention interest rates because I tell everybody we've been spoiled for too long. With 3% out there, long-term fixed, 30-year fixed at 3.5%, 4% for a little while there. Now we're at 6%, but that's not enough to stop what's going on now. And I'm also seeing a great influx of requests for tenants to buy out landlords. Probably 50% of the deals I'm working on right now are related to that. I think now is a good time to exit the market. And so we had a little bit of a discussion surrounding that. Jim was talking about that ahead of the call starting. So I'm seeing a good bit of that. I haven't slowed down a bit. I'm just focused more on purchases than refis now. So the people will make comments about interest rates, but it's not slowing anything down yet.
Greg, from your perspective?
Yeah, I guess I'd agree. I'm definitely not seeing any slowing down. I do wonder a little bit on the new equipment side when we talk, if these interest rates do continue, the cost, I posted a link last night to a bunch of X9 Deere combines for sale, 21 models, and you look at the numbers, it's like, oh my God, these things are so expensive, and it's the psychology part of it is the interest rates have been so long, they've been nothing for so long now that we get used to that. So I'm not sure quite how the math works on the new equipment side. If and when commodity prices do back off for whatever reason, then we can have a problem, which might introduce a leasing situation to come back. But on the used side, I mean, there's so much cash buying of all this equipment, guys in strong position. And so in the short term, no, I'm not seeing the rising interest rates have an effect.
All right. Well, we're kind of halfway through the hour here. I'm going to ask one more question here. I'm going to open it up for folks to submit some more questions to ask our panel here if they have them. Matt, as we turn and look at the end of 2022 and into 2023, give me some of the things that are on your mind as far as targets and goals and kind of pursuits for your operation.
I think that, Ashley mentioned operating capital, and that's a big deal to me. I think just from a security standpoint, and having the confidence when there's an opportunity, whether it's land or more acres or machine, whatever that is, to be able to make a good decision. And so I think that in my particular area, I do think the interest rates are going to make a big difference. I think that in our part of the country anyway, I think there's guys who have been aggressive in making input decisions and locking up land deals and maybe doing a good job of marketing. And so I think there's going to be guys that have done a poor job of marketing, and those same guys probably haven't locked in their inputs properly and been precautionary about watching their financials as close. And I think in this time that we're moving into, especially where things are so high and there's so much volatility, that I think there's going to become more machinery for sale. I think there's going to become more land for sale. I think there's going to be more land for rent, because I think there's going to be guys that are going to kind of throw in the towel when they think about having to, deliver corn that they sold for $5 to the elevator, and they're still paying $1,800 for anhydrous or whatever that is. So I think there's going to be a big variance in what guys' success rate is. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities moving into 23 and 24 if you've kind of played your cards right, if you will. And so I think the interest rates, I think the land values, all that play into that. So for us, I think we just want to try to be in a position to be able to have the right amount of operating capital, to be in a position where we can take an advantage of whatever it is that kind of gets thrown our way. And so with the machinery prices so high, as Greg said, and things of that nature, I think there's just going to be it's going to be a a wide variance, if you will, of kind of where each producer is at.
As you look out, you've made a lot of investments over the last year or two. Is there anything on your radar of like, I'm going to look at that as I go forward for potential for my farm?
Yeah, I mean, we're strictly a cropping operation, and so we've got a lot of trucking money, capital tied up in trucks and things of that nature, and so we're trying to kind of tie in the fertilizer and the grain and potentially do some grain buying and things of that nature. And so yeah, we're wanting to branch out a little bit and kind of take advantage of some of the capital investments that we've made, and just kind of be ready, if you will, when that opportunity comes for an increase in size. If we, I mean, it's not that we want to go out aggressively looking for that at this point where we're at. We're pretty comfortable, but if that opportunity does come along, which I think it will, because of the way that things are so, as Greg said, crazy right now, scary. So we just want to be available, to take advantage of those.
Ashley, as you look out at conversations that you will likely be having at the end of this year and going into 2023, what's your expectation? What do you think?
I would like to see, because I think Matt makes a very good point about there's going to be some opportunities going into 23 and 24, because you're going to have people that, I think now is the time to build the nest egg, to look at working capital and prepare yourself for those opportunities. But some people are setting themselves up in some cases to be that opportunity, if that makes sense, if they're not locking in inputs, if they're not paying attention, because, it's easy sometimes to become complacent when things are good per se. So if you think too much, if things, what can't I afford or what can't I afford when soybeans are this, and not pay attention to the input side as much, not pay attention to your balance sheet, not be an astute financial manager. I think some people could be sorely disappointed, because I've been doing this long enough to know that, back when 2012 was a banner year, here in my part of the country, it was a perfect storm of cotton prices, peanut prices, as well as yields. But then you had some people that still the next year were short of paying off their operating lines and making payments and such. And you're like, how in the world did this happen? This should have been a great year for everyone, but it's all about management. It doesn't matter how high commodity prices are. If you're not taking a look at everything else along the way, not just waiting to the end of the year to have that conversation, you could get yourself in quite a situation.
Yeah, for sure. Jim, as you look at where we're at with land prices now, give me that crystal ball. Talk to me about over the next 6 months, your expectations and trends that you think we're going to see here.
I think we're going to see a double-digit increase in the next 6 months. Could possibly
10%, 15, 20?
That's I'd
Any
say,
of those?
I would say 10 to 15% is it could happen. It could go higher. Like I said, if that supply doesn't come around, it could go higher. But I think 10 to 15%. I think it could possibly happen. Yes, I do.
Greg, as we start to look out at this machinery market and trying to see over the top of something, how long are we going to wait to see over the top of this machinery peak that we're in?
No, see, now you're kind of poking at my Norwegianness here, Clinton, and I don't like to predict things. I can report on things, but no, looking ahead, I do see a danger here, and it's kind of universal. We're all in some sense waiting for the other shoe to drop. Ag is so cyclical. It always has been that way. It's in your DNA, whether you're a dealer, farmer, or whatever. And there was that thought was sort of prevalent early in 22, coming off of the way 21 ended with the equipment market, but the market's just gone higher here. And the thing I would caution against, there's a school of thought out there that when commodity prices do soften for whatever reason, and again, the rest of 22 into 23 looked bullish. There's a school of thought that, machinery values will recede sharply. And that you're basing that on what was in the past, which was true back then. But there are things underneath this market right now that are different, and the supply is so tight. And if you, again, pull back, you have to consider the number of like new tractor units that were sold in 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Those numbers were lower. And now they're 4, 5, 6 years old. You can't snap your fingers and make there be a ton of 6-year-old used combines and tractors. They aren't there. So the thing that worries me is, how long the money spigot stays open here. Can new equipment sales catch up in essence? Because dealers could have sold a lot more new iron end of last year, early this year, but they couldn't make it fast enough. Manufacturers, that just-in-time production model is awesome until we can't meet demand. So I'm worried that if that shuts off before enough new gets sold, that if you don't like paying a premium for used equipment now when you're making money, it ain't going to be, it's just will be doubly painful to pay a high price when times are tough. And those are the fundamentals underneath that are concerning right now. So you just need to weigh that and, think about it, and I guess get your horses in a row and act accordingly.
We didn't talk about like the automobile side of things and farm trucks, but this has been the similar story, right? Availability and demand.
Yeah, it's a spot on match. I was chit-chatting with Jim a bit ago, and, I think at the end of 21, the National Automobile Association came out and said, used values are up 37%, used pickups and cars. And I read that in our Minneapolis paper, and I thought, you know what, that's probably about exactly what used farm equipment values are up if I chart out our data. And that's, like Jim said, land value is up 36.5% last year. It's a breathtaking number. But, compiling auction prices for 32 plus years now, I guess one of the things I've come to respect about it through an up market or a down market is the numbers don't lie. It brings what it brings on that day in that area. And right now it's a runaway freight train going up, and there's reasons behind it. But, I guess I've always hoped that our numbers can help you keep your eyes wide open and just make the best decisions you can, whatever you're looking to do, buy or sell out there.
All right. Well, that's a great way to kind of wrap us up for this. We'll give you a few more seconds here if anybody has any questions of our panel. I just want to thank the entire group for joining us for this discussion today, because I think it is an interesting time to be in agriculture. I think it's an interesting time to be covering agriculture and talking about all of the things that, Matt's doing every day to try to feed the world. We look at what's going on with Ukraine. We had a story in a show today about, the World Bank's concerned about people not getting enough food in parts of the country. And we know that we're here to do every bit of the job that we can do. And it takes all corners of this industry, and we've got hard work ahead of us. We've got plenty of challenges, but we also have plenty of opportunity. And so we're happy to be part of that industry. And I appreciate every one of these folks taking a few minutes to talk about that and being willing to share their advice and their experiences and their information with the folks that are watching, just to kind of get a handle on where we are going through 2022, because this is unlike any other year that we've seen in probably the last decade and maybe in the last 30 years. And so, guys, I don't know if anybody has any final thoughts, but from there, I'm just going to say thank you for watching. So anybody else have any closing thoughts or considerations about this year and the year ahead? If not, we're going to call it good. Thank you all for watching. Thanks for joining us for today's Farm Country Update. We hope you have a great day as you go about your business and a great week ahead.
Thank you.